Hey there, I hope you're having a good day. If you have the time, you can come listen to me unpack the years of my torment inside the Church of Christ or the Iglesia ni Cristo. This is all certifiably my experience, so even though I'm talking about the church ministry in this video, you should probably leave the church members in specific out of it. They're completely separate from this discussion. I was born and raised in the church, and I was a member until I was about 19 years old, which was 5 years ago now. It all ended when some Judas Iscariot type saw my TikTok and showed it to the church ministry. That got the pastor talking to my parents, parents talking to me, and it was a whole mess, but we'll get into that later. Separating myself from the church has been incredibly difficult because of their ability to manipulate what they see as teachings and have that affect the way of thinking of their members. I've now realized that they also manipulate the Bible, but at the time, a lot of my experiences were solely about how the teachings themselves affect me. I want to say it all started when I was 12 years old and I realized that I may be bisexual. At the time, I was still devout in my beliefs, so when my family would pray at the end of the day, I'd pray with them and then I'd pray when I get back to my own room. One of the things that was troubling me at the time is that I really did believe that anyone who wasn't inside the church was going to go to hell, so I was worried about a lot of my relatives that I love. At this time, I wasn't really thinking about how me being bisexual could affect my faith. I remember my friends in elementary school asking me if I supported gay marriage, and I said no. And they said, "Aren't you gay?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but you know." And that's when I really started to understand that there is this type of view and dissonance within the teaching and who I see myself as. Around this time, I think I was 12 or 13, and my parents saw my YouTube history and saw that I was watching atheist videos and queer videos. My dad talked to me about it afterwards, but I did deny and lied at that time. I realized I was a lesbian when I was 14 years old, and that's really when I started to struggle with my beliefs and where they're going to land me when it comes to my identity. I'm glad that the people around me, in school at least, saw it as perfectly fine, and that I could have a free space to really think about myself and grow in that way without the influence of the church. At 14 years old, my parents saw text messages between me and my best friend at the time and pulled me out of school. When I was 19 years old, I finally was able to ask them why they did that when I was 14. They said it was because the messages were inappropriate, which I do wish that they explained to me when I was 14 years old, because I digested that as fully like, I'm going to be sent back home to the Philippines, I'm not going to school. And to be honest, they did tell me that it's because Canada made me gay. At the time, I was out of school for about a month and a half, and at nighttime, sometimes I'd have to take care of my youngest sister, who was an infant at the time. My parents thought that was fine because I wasn't going to school anyways. I think my parents and their beliefs have been incredibly influenced by the church. My dad grew up in the church, and my mom converted when they were 16 years old because they wanted to be together. That being said, I'm not here to make the claim that my parents are bad parents. I'm here to make the claim that the church is a horrible influence. Everyone has their moments of weakness and moments of bad decisions. They obviously did take care of me as a kid. They put a roof over my head and food on the table. I think to parents, when you criticize the way that they parent you, they often think that it's because we think that they're just terrible parents. But in reality, especially when your child is an adult, most of the time they are just voicing a different opinion about you. I feel like the decisions that you make over and over again in life are what make you who you are, not the decisions you make when you're at your worst. To me, though, what was evident is that there was a lot of discomfort when it comes to my parents and thinking about what identity I could possibly have. Unfortunately, your discomfort as a parent has nothing to do with the child. When you are a parent, you are expected by the child to be able to educate them and talk to them about anything they're feeling. My parents were deeply uncomfortable with me being queer. And their religion obviously didn't help with that either. I think I've known from a young age that the church is the ultimate authority over us, that my parents would sooner question me, my motivations, or anything like that, than question the church and why they teach the things that they teach. I don't doubt that they now think that pulling a child out of school isn't going to make them any less gay, or sending a child to the Philippines isn't going to make them any less gay. But when all you're taught about gay people is fear, and that it's influential on other kids, I suppose, then I guess that is how you react. After about a month or a month and a half, I was back to school because my counselor convinced my parents that sending me back to the Philippines is a terrible idea because I have more opportunities in Canada. I'm really grateful that I got to stay in Canada, to be honest. That being said, I didn't have a smartphone for 2 years because I couldn't be trusted, obviously. That was just horrible. It didn't work to strengthen my faith or strengthen anything in me. I was just really bored, I guess. Now, through all of this, I was still going to church twice a week because I got baptized when I was 12. So before you're baptized as like a 12-year-old, you go to church once a week, and then after that, we go to church twice a week. I want to say that getting pulled out of school and all that fear that was put in me for when my parents saw that I was gay again, I guess, really was one of the last nails on the coffin of my faith. I just didn't believe. Now I felt like at 14, every time I'd go to church, I was actually listening to what they had to say and not trying to put them on a pedestal, not thinking that everything they absolutely said was true. I realized that they misrepresent a lot of things like evolution in order to make the faith stronger. Honestly, that's really, really common, so it almost doesn't even sound like a dig, but that's really terrible that churches do that all the time. I was kind of terribly afraid of the Bible, honestly. Like, I didn't want to read it. I thought that God's word was undiscernible. That's really how the church presents it. I thought that it was incredibly hard to understand. So I didn't want to read it, and I was scared of it. I've been reading the Bible recently, actually, and now that I'm reading it, I'm realizing that they misrepresent the Bible too, so that's great. At 16 years old, I had the right to a smartphone again, so that's good. And I want to say the years from when I was 16 to when I was 19 were probably the best times of having a relationship with my parents. I think often parents think they know their kids because they grew up with the kid, but to be honest, your kid doesn't start developing their own identity and understanding of the world until they're much older. During COVID in 2020, I had lost a lot of weight, which was a goal of mine at the time. I wasn't healthiest with my habits and my weight, but the point of me losing weight becomes important later on. I was honestly feeling really good at the time when I was 19 years old. I was talking to a lot of friends online, and I felt really good about my physical appearance. I felt so good that I started thinking about my parents and the fact that they have been looser and more understanding in the intervening years from when I was 16 to 19 years old. So I thought during 2020, on my birthday, I'm gonna come out. I was thinking it's my birthday. Hopefully no one gets mad at me. I'm 19 years old now. I'm close to being fully an adult. So hopefully my parents won't now still think it's a phase or some kind of influence or something like that. I didn't know how they'd react, but they definitely surprised me by not freaking out. I could tell they still had some discomforts, but what I could tell is that in the intervening years, they definitely have had a change of some opinions about how they feel about my identity. I really love that memory, and it gave me even more confidence in myself, I'd say. I will say, at the point from when I was 19 to now, most of my conflict with my family has not been about my sexuality. It's not something that we talk about, but I'm assuming that's most kids with their parents. I started making TikTok videos, talking to people on Omegle about mostly philosophical, political, and religious topics. I didn't have my personal name out there, I just used a username, because I was still afraid that other people in the church are going to see me, recognize me perhaps. I thought that I had lost enough weight to where my appearance was so different that people from the church, because we have been attending online instead of in person, might not recognize me as much. So I was still worried about people seeing my videos, people that I knew that might tell my parents about my videos or might tell the church about my videos, but I thought that maybe I had enough safeguard to prevent that. I never talked about what church I belonged in or anything like that, but I did talk about the fact that at the time I was an atheist and the process in which I came to understand myself as such. Even though I talked about being an atheist, it wasn't really about personal experience. I was talking more about my rationale, and philosophy has got me to the point where I could confidently say I was an atheist. This is the part where I have to speculate because I have no idea who told the Iglesia about my videos. My assumptions were that it had to be someone who could recognize me even after I lost weight. And without my name out there, I just thought that people who would doubt themselves enough to think that it wasn't me. It's interesting though, because I didn't get a text, I didn't get any kind of communication from this person, whoever they are. They just showed the church On the opportune day in 2020 still, when my parents and I were in a car waiting for my sisters to finish their school, my dad gets a phone call. When I saw that it was the pastor, my heart absolutely dropped and I knew it was going to happen. Pick up the phone. I hear the pastor on the other side saying, "Hey, one of your daughters is making TikToks." My parents initially thought that it was one of my sisters, maybe making some kind of dance video or something like that. I was already telling them that they can hang up because it's me. They did not hang up and got told that apparently I'm making videos talking about the church. Apparently I said that I no longer believe in God, but I still do have a pink Bible. I felt like it was a nightmare that literally came from the deepest pits of my fears, just flourished in that car. It did seem like they watched enough videos to know kind of a grasp of my beliefs of other things, because they started talking about my identity as well, and that was really cringy. Regardless, when they stopped the conversation, I was already bawling. My mom was already bawling. In my head, I'm like, my life's over. I'm gonna get kicked out. What do we do from here? I remember my mom's first reaction being that the church is one of the only things that they can give us. My mom said, "We're not rich. You don't have a lot of things that it can pass down to you, but the church is one of them." I think it's really interesting to think about it in that way. I think a lot of people who've gone through hardship cling on to their faith as if it's the only thing that they can take with them anywhere. It was a longer conversation within the car, but my parents agreed that what I needed to do was either stay in the church, delete the videos, and stay at home, or if I wanted to speak like this, meaning have opinions publicly, I suppose, that I get out of the house. To me, that's a lot of an ultimatum and not really a choice. But to people who believe that an all-loving God will give you a choice between heaven and hell, maybe it does seem like a good choice to give your kid. I remember as I was crying, I started filming. I was like, I'm gonna share this experience because I'm probably gonna need support. And at the time, I really had a lot of my community more so online than in person. Not only because of COVID, but also because I don't really like socializing. I also didn't have a lot of people in my personal life that I felt like would support me in this way. I can't even remember if we picked my sisters up from school or if we went home right away. I don't remember what happened. That being said, we did get home and still have more of the conversation, and to me it was just both of us have kind of calmed down, but my parents didn't change their tone about the choice that they were going to give me. I did genuinely believe like they were picking the church over me. At 19, I don't think I fully understood the gravity of the situation. Thinking back on it now, I don't know if I could have, but I definitely would have thought about it for longer. I was really upset and I was inside my room packing my stuff, essentially talking to a friend and asking if I could stay over their place for a little bit. I made a GoFundMe with the thought that I'm gonna need a lot of money. I have no money. If you're not aware, at the time, Canada didn't pay their creators for TikTok. I don't know if they pay them now, but definitely not at the time. I remember that the GoFundMe needed a goal, and I remember putting $10,000, which is so much money. I think at the time I was just like, what is a big number? Let's put that. I am so grateful and thankful to this day to the people who helped me in any way they could, the nice words, the money, anything like that. I think I had it up for, I don't remember specifically how many days, but it was over, I want to say $1,200 when I took it down. I felt so guilty. I left my house that day and stayed with a friend. When the friend came and picked me up, I got a call from the pastor who was essentially talking about the fact that it's okay because if I don't have a girlfriend, I haven't even sinned yet, so it's fine. Obviously, I didn't care to hear this from him at all, so didn't take anything from that. I also posted the footage of me in our car, essentially saying that this is what's going on in my life right now. Looking back on it, I definitely should have muted the clip. I wasn't listening to what was the discussion in the background, honestly. I guess in the background you could hear my dad talking about the church authority, or just the church in general, talking about sometimes it is a little hard to believe, and faith is important and all of those things. I didn't think it was particularly scathing of a review of the church, but I guess he got in trouble for it because my parents then call me when I get to the house of my friend and start cussing me out. Because apparently the church authorities saw that video too. It's really crazy how much the thinking of the church has wormed its way into my family. I've never, not one day in my life, seen my parents read the Bible, but they will tote that Bible in the words of those preachers like it is the only thing in their life that matters. Do they know what's in the Bible? No. Do they know the history of it? No, not at all. And I don't think any of the pastors from the church do either. I've spent a lot of years being really hurt by this, and honestly, one of the things that I've realized now is that there are different manners of thinking in which it is kind of a fascinating situation. How do people get so caught up in their beliefs that they'd rather put away their child than they would their beliefs in a church? My belief is that you're 100% sure your kid is here, and you're not 100% sure your God that this church is teaching you is here. So to me, it's not really much of a discussion there, but like I said, it's really interesting how people's way of thinking is drastically changed by those around them. Taking their words over mine, their beliefs over mine, even though for years and years, of course I would have rathered I wasn't gay. Of course I would have rathered I believed in God. Life would have been so much easier for me had that been the case. It's crazy because I wasn't doing anything of harm to anybody. I was sharing my opinions, sharing my views, and that in itself was enough. I think my biggest irritation now as an adult myself is the fact that I have 2 younger siblings. Both of them are much younger than me. And I know for a fact they're not going to agree with my parents or the church about everything in their life. By the way, if you're thinking that it's already miraculous and wonderful that my parents are okay with me being gay, I sincerely hope that you don't already have any kids. If you're in your head thinking, it's going to be hard for me to accept if my kid is like this or my kid is like that, I think it's best that you just don't have kids. Absolutely, your decision to support your kid or even be okay with their identity is not worthy of praise, I don't think. The church preaches this kind of division, and they use the Bible as their crutch. I already disagree with the way that they even use the Bible, and I feel like I needed to put that out there before I really talk about my experiences, because I feel like for religious people, they're going to hear that I'm gay, they're going to hear anything like that, and they're going to think, oh, you have a vendetta. And a matter of fact, my parents have already said that to me multiple times. They don't even take my beliefs seriously, regardless of what I have to say about the church, because to them, the fact that I'm gay just means can't be valid about your opinion on this church. It's so crazy. They ask for your offerings twice a week, every single time you come. And then they tell you that only some people can actually understand the Word of God. And that in itself does make you think, okay, these are the people that can understand the Word of God. So if I'm reading the Bible myself and it's not making sense, I just need to have faith because they understand. And they really ignore and just create and fabricate new pieces of information all the time, honestly. It's honestly wild to me that anyone can ever read the Bible and think that it's talking about them, which is why the church is as strict as it is, because they genuinely believe that Felix Manalo, who discovered the church, was like a messenger from God. It's so interesting, that way of thinking to me, because my parents hold the belief simultaneously that they cannot understand all the words of God, but also they understand enough to know that what the church says is absolutely correct. That makes no sense to me. The crazy thing is, I've now 100% read more of the Bible than my parents ever have. And most of what the Iglesia ni Cristo says are just misrepresented BS. If you don't know the context behind a lot of the stories in the Bible, you're going to misunderstand. It's a book with so many contradictions, so many different narratives and stories and different authors that of course it's not going to have the same point of view the whole time. But if you think it's God's word, then obviously it must be perfect. And perfection also is subjective to the point. And I think honestly a lot of really devout members might even be afraid of reading the Bible, because what happens when you do see contradictions? You might question your beliefs, and that's really dangerous. I don't live in the Philippines anymore, but I really feel for the people who still live in the Philippines, because that's where the influence of the church is at its greatest. It's sickening. They even mandate their Filipino members to vote all together. They must vote for the official that the church supports. It's very weird. To any members in the Philippines, I read some testimonies online of people's opinions. It's really sad, and I honestly just wish that at a point they can get out of it, they can get their family out of it, and that they can safely do it. Because like I said, their influence is so much greater in the Philippines. They couldn't do a lot of really weird BS here to sue people, to try and quiet them. It's not going to work here. In the Philippines it might though, because they have that kind of influence over there. I got a lot of messages from people within the church, and even though most of them were hate, like I don't understand it anymore, or I don't understand the Bible, or anything like that, I did also get messages from people within the church, some I even knew from going to my own district locale church, who said that they're glad that they at least is some public pushback to this church. And that to me was really powerful, honestly, because I would go to church thinking I was the only one here who felt any kind of different way about this. And I think the majority of young members within the church are becoming more aware of how the church manipulates its members, and I'm really glad about that. My relationship with my parents has been completely on and off since. It's not really been the same, and I don't know if it ever could. It has been really difficult, especially with the religious trauma of it all as well. And the thought of my sisters going through that, and that I have to be strong enough to be able to support them as well, if and when a time does come where they realize that this might not be what they want to believe. Those are the things that keep me going and keep me wanting to really speak on this. It's absolutely not okay to have people manipulate the words of a 2,000-year-old book. And that's like the New Testament. It's way older than that if you count the Old Testament. It is an incredibly old book where most of us don't even speak the original language. The Church of Christ ministers definitely don't speak the original language. They have to have 50 different translations of the Bible to even have it say what they want it to say. And then they use it to manipulate people to do what they want. It's disgusting. If you're in the church, I really hope the best for you. And I really hope that if you want to get out, that you're able to. And to anyone else, with or without the church, I think that the most valuable lesson in life is really that truth doesn't have anything to fear. If you have to investigate something, if you want to read a Bible verse, if you want to look into the history of anything, truth can't just get falsified and manipulated like that. If you really want to search for the truth, you search far and wide. You look at different sources. You look at what different people who know the topic are thinking. Then you can come to your own conclusion. I really do not recommend letting anyone with a benefit, especially a religious benefit, to try and persuade you into joining a religion. Of course, they're going to want you to join their religion, right? I thank you so much for watching. I hope you understood. Thank you for your patience. I hope you have a great, great rest of your day. Thank you.